What if I told you that a fragment of papyrus, smaller than a credit card, could shatter everything we thought we knew about the Gospels? Picture this. In the remote caves of Qumran, near the Dead Sea, archaeologists discovered something that shouldn't have been there. A mysterious Greek manuscript fragment that's sending shockwaves through the world of biblical scholarship. This tiny scrap of history, known as 7Q5, could be the earliest physical evidence of the New Testament ever found. But here's what makes this discovery even more extraordinary. This fragment wasn't found just anywhere in Qumran. It was discovered in Cave 7, the only cave among all the Dead Sea Scroll discoveries that contained exclusively Greek manuscripts. In a community known for preserving Hebrew and Aramaic texts, why was there a cave dedicated solely to Greek documents? Some of the world's leading scholars believe this fragment could be a piece of Mark's Gospel, written around 50 AD, decades earlier than anyone thought possible. If they're right, we're looking at a manuscript created when some of the apostles were still alive, when the memories of Jesus' ministry were still fresh in the minds of his followers. The implications are staggering. This isn't just about dating an ancient manuscript. This is about rewriting our understanding of how the Gospels were composed, copied, and circulated in the earliest days of Christianity. But here's where it gets controversial. Many experts are fighting against this identification. They say it's impossible. They claim there's no way a Christian text could have ended up in the caves of Qumran. They argue that the fragment is too small, too damaged to make such extraordinary claims. Today you're going to discover why this tiny fragment has sparked a worldwide academic war, how cutting-edge technology is revealing secrets hidden for 2,000 years, what this means for the history of early Christianity, why some experts are desperately trying to dismiss this evidence. The shocking implications for our understanding of the Bible. Get ready for a journey into one of the most fascinating mysteries in biblical archaeology. A story where ancient manuscripts meet modern technology, where traditional theories clash with revolutionary discoveries, and where a tiny piece of papyrus might just change everything we thought we knew about the origins of Christianity. Before 1972, the academic world had settled into a comfortable consensus about the Gospels. Scholars confidently asserted that our earliest physical evidence of the New Testament came from well into the 2nd century AD. The idea of finding first-century manuscript fragments seemed like an impossible dream. After all, how could such fragile documents survive 2,000 years of history? The discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls had already revolutionized our understanding of ancient Jewish texts. But Cave 7 at Qumran presented a unique puzzle. Unlike the other 10 caves filled with Hebrew and Aramaic manuscripts, Cave 7 contained only Greek texts. This anomaly challenged everything scholars thought they knew about the Qumran community. Traditional manuscript dating methods relied heavily on paleography, the study of ancient handwriting styles. Experts had developed detailed chronologies, claiming they could date manuscripts within 50-year periods based on how the letters were formed. These methods suggested that our earliest Gospels were written no earlier than 70 AD, with surviving copies dating much later. But there was a problem with this consensus. Early Christian writers like Papyrus and Irenaeus had claimed that Mark wrote his Gospel much earlier, during the lifetime of Peter. Scholars dismissed these ancient testimonies as unreliable, preferring their modern dating methods. The gap between traditional church claims and academic conclusions seemed unbridgeable. The Qumran community itself posed another challenge. Historians had painted them as an isolated Jewish sect, separated from the wider world of Greek culture and early Christianity. The presence of Greek texts in Cave 7 didn't fit this picture. What were these documents? Who was reading them? And why were they preserved alongside the other Dead Sea Scrolls? Traditional explanations suggested these Greek fragments must be pieces of the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, but attempts to identify them with known Septuagint texts failed. The fragments remained stubbornly unidentified, a mystery waiting to be solved. Then came an even bigger problem. The accepted chronology of New Testament texts relied heavily on the assumption that complex theological developments required multiple generations. The idea that a gospel could have been written, copied, and circulated widely enough to reach Qumran before 68 AD seemed impossible to many scholars. The stakes were enormous. If any of these Greek fragments could be identified as New Testament texts, it would force a complete re-evaluation of early Christian history. The comfortable theories about gospel development, the relationship between Jewish and Christian communities, and the transmission of ancient texts would all need to be reconsidered. This was the academic landscape in 1972, when a Spanish scholar named José O'Callaghan began examining photographs of the Cave 7 fragments. What he was about to propose would ignite one of the most heated controversies in biblical studies, a debate that continues to this day. When José O'Callaghan first announced his identification of 7Q5 as a fragment of Mark's Gospel, specifically Mark 6:52-53, the academic world erupted in controversy. Working in his Barcelona library, he had done something no one else had thought to do. He looked beyond the Old Testament for possible matches to the mysterious Greek text. The moment of discovery must have been electrifying. As O'Callaghan compared the fragmentary letters with the text of Mark, describing the aftermath of Jesus walking on water, the pieces seemed to fit perfectly. The surviving letters aligned with the passage about the disciples' hardened hearts, their failure to understand about the loaves. But the problems with traditional manuscript analysis methods quickly became apparent. Paleographers insisted their dating techniques were reliable, yet they couldn't explain why different experts reached wildly different conclusions about the same manuscript. Some dated 7Q5 to the 1st century, others to the 2nd or 3rd. The traditional methods seemed to produce more confusion than clarity. Attempts to identify the fragment with other texts proved equally frustrating. Scholars searched through the entire corpus of known Greek literature, looking for alternative matches. Each proposed identification fell apart under scrutiny. The letters visible on 7Q5 stubbornly resisted every identification except Mark's Gospel. The controversy grew even more heated when questions of manuscript transmission arose. How could a copy of Mark's Gospel reach Qumran before the caves were sealed in 68 AD? Traditional theories about the slow development and spread of Christian texts couldn't account for such early transmission, yet historical evidence showed that texts could travel surprisingly quickly through the Roman world. Critics raised objection after objection. The fragment was too small to make a positive identification. The handwriting style could be from a later period. Christian texts wouldn't be preserved at Qumran. The chronology was too tight for the text to reach the dead. Each of these objections seemed reasonable on the surface. But as scholars dug deeper, the traditional explanations began to show cracks. The assumption that Christian texts couldn't reach Qumran proved especially problematic. Evidence was mounting that Jewish and Christian communities had more contact in the 1st century than previously thought. Meanwhile, the standard dating methods faced their own crisis. New technologies were revealing the limitations of traditional paleography. Microscopic analysis showed that seemingly identical handwriting styles could come from different periods, while apparently different styles could be contemporary. The comfortable certainties of manuscript dating began to crumble. The academic establishment responded with increasingly desperate arguments. Some suggested that any match between 7Q5 and Mark's Gospel must be coincidental. Others proposed elaborate scenarios involving later deposits in the cave, despite the clear archaeological evidence that the caves were sealed in 68 AD. But the most serious challenge to traditional solutions came from an unexpected direction. Computer analysis was beginning to transform the study of ancient texts. When Carsten Thiede applied these new methods to 7Q5 in the 1980s, the results supported O'Callaghan's identification. The statistical probability of another text matching. The fragment's letter pattern seemed vanishingly small. The comfortable consensus was breaking down. Traditional methods couldn't solve the mystery of 7Q5, and each attempted solution seemed to raise more questions than it answered. Something new was needed, a revolutionary approach that could bridge the gap between ancient manuscripts and modern technology. When Carsten Thiede began applying computer analysis to the 7Q5 fragment in the 1980s, he was stepping into territory no biblical scholar had explored before. The technology he used was revolutionary, advanced imaging techniques originally developed for satellite photography, now turned toward ancient manuscripts. Each scan revealed new details invisible to the naked eye, building a more complete picture of the text than ever before possible. The advancement in technology brought startling revelations. Under microscopic examination, the papyrus fibers showed patterns consistent with first-century manufacturing techniques. The ink composition matched formulas known to have been used in professional scribal workshops of the period. Even the way the letters were formed suggested a trained scribe working within established Greek literary traditions. But perhaps the most significant breakthrough came from mapping ancient trade routes. Historical records showed that texts could travel from Rome to Jerusalem in as little as 2 months. Professional scribal networks stretched across the Mediterranean, copying and distributing texts with remarkable efficiency. The idea that a copy of Mark's Gospel could reach Qumran by 68 AD was not just possible, it was entirely plausible. The investigation took another dramatic turn when researchers began examining the copper scroll found in Cave 3 at Qumran. This remarkable document, dated to around 100 AD, proved that the caves continued to receive deposits after the commonly accepted date of 68 AD. The implications were profound. Even if critics were right about later dating, the presence of 7Q5 in Cave 7 could still be explained. Meanwhile, archaeological evidence was revealing new details about the Qumran community's connections to the wider world. Far from being isolated ascetics, they were part of a complex network of religious communities. Trade records showed regular contact with Jerusalem, Damascus, and even Alexandria. Greek documents found at the site included business records and personal letters, suggesting regular communication with the Hellenistic world. The investigation into scribal practices yielded another surprising discovery. Analysis of other manuscripts from the period showed that professional scribes often worked in multiple languages, producing texts for different communities. The presence of Greek manuscripts at Qumran wasn't an anomaly. It was evidence of standard scribal practices in the multicultural world of first-century Palestine. Digital reconstruction techniques allowed researchers to test different possible readings of the fragment. By comparing letter patterns with every known Greek text from the period, they could calculate the statistical probability of various identifications. The results consistently pointed to Mark's Gospel as the most likely match. Alternative proposals required more special pleading, more assumptions, more unlikely coincidences. The emergence of new imaging technologies transformed the debate. Multispectral imaging could detect traces of ink invisible to previous methods. Three-dimensional mapping of the papyrus surface revealed impressions left by lost text. Each new technique added another piece to the puzzle, building a more complete picture of the original document. But perhaps the most dramatic evidence came from comparative analysis with other first-century manuscripts. The letter forms, line spacing, and margin measurements in 7q5 matched patterns seen in definitively dated first-century texts. The scribal hand showed characteristics that would later evolve into distinctly different styles, a kind of missing link in paleographic evolution. As the evidence accumulated, a new picture began to emerge. The traditional timeline of gospel, composition and transmission needed revision. The rigid boundaries scholars had drawn between Jewish and Christian communities became more permeable. The sophisticated networks of textual transmission in the first-century Mediterranean world came into clearer focus. The implications reached far beyond this single fragment. If 7q5 was indeed from Mark's Gospel, it would provide physical evidence for the early Christian tradition that Mark wrote his Gospel while Peter was still alive. It would demonstrate that Christian texts circulated more widely and earlier than previously thought. It would force a re-evaluation of how we date ancient manuscripts and understand the relationship between early Christian and Jewish communities. The breakthrough in understanding 7q5 came from combining multiple lines of evidence, advanced technology, historical analysis, and a deeper understanding of first-century manuscript production and distribution. Each piece of the puzzle reinforced the others, building a compelling case for the fragment's identification. Modern imaging technology revealed details about the manuscript that had been invisible to earlier researchers. Multispectral imaging showed that the text was written by a professional scribe using high-quality ink consistent with first-century formulas. The papyrus itself, when examined under powerful microscopes, displayed manufacturing techniques characteristic of the period. Before 70 AD, the computer analysis pioneered by Theda went far beyond simple pattern matching. By digitizing thousands of ancient Greek texts, researchers could calculate the statistical probability of different letter combinations occurring in specific patterns. The results were striking. The likelihood of another text matching the letter patterns in 7q5, as well as Mark 6:52-53, was extraordinarily small, but technology alone couldn't solve the mystery. Historical research revealed that the traditional picture of isolated religious communities was incorrect. The Roman world was connected by sophisticated networks of trade and communication. Professional scribes traveled these networks, producing manuscripts for different communities. A text written in Rome could reach Jerusalem within weeks, then be copied and distributed throughout Palestine. Evidence from other archaeological sites supported this new understanding. The port city of Caesarea showed clear evidence of Greek manuscript production. Synagogue archives contained both Hebrew and Greek texts. Business documents revealed regular communication between Jewish communities across the Mediterranean. The copper scroll from Qumran's Cave 3 proved that manuscripts continued to be deposited in the caves after 68 AD. Analysis of scribal practices revealed another crucial piece of evidence. The handwriting in 7q5 showed characteristics of a transitional period in Greek writing. The letter forms combined elements that would later develop into distinct styles, exactly what we would expect in a manuscript from the middle of the 1st century. The physical characteristics of the fragment also told an important story. The line spacing, margin measurements, and column width matched patterns seen in other professional Greek manuscripts from the period. The scribe used standard abbreviations, known from 1st century Jewish Greek texts. Even the way the papyrus was cut followed patterns documented in other manuscripts from the same period. Comparative analysis with other Dead Sea Scrolls yielded additional insights. The Greek fragments from Cave 7 showed similar patterns of preservation and damage. The chemical composition of the ink matched other manuscripts from the same period. The layout and formatting followed conventions used in other professional Greek manuscripts found at Qumran. New understanding of first-century Jewish communities provided crucial context. Far from being isolated from Greek culture, many Jewish communities were actively engaged with the Hellenistic world. The Qumran community itself showed evidence of regular contact with the wider world, including Greek-speaking Jewish communities. The transmission of texts in the ancient world proved to be more sophisticated than previously thought. Professional scribes maintained networks across the Mediterranean. Religious communities exchanged texts regularly. The process of copying and distributing manuscripts was well organized and efficient. Archaeological evidence from other sites confirmed this picture. Similar Greek manuscripts have been found at multiple locations in Palestine. The patterns of textual transmission visible in these discoveries support the possibility of Mark's Gospel reaching Qumran before 68 AD. The combination of these different lines of evidence created a compelling solution to the mystery of 7Q5. Physical evidence confirms a first-century date. Advanced imaging reveals professional scribal production. Statistical analysis supports identification with Mark's Gospel. Historical research shows plausible transmission routes. Archaeological context confirms Greek text preservation. Comparative analysis validates dating methods. Cultural evidence supports manuscript circulation patterns. This convergence of evidence doesn't just solve the puzzle of one manuscript fragment, it transforms our understanding of how texts circulated in the ancient world and how early Christian documents were transmitted and preserved. The evidence supporting the identification of 7Q5 as a fragment of Mark's Gospel has undergone rigorous validation from multiple scientific and academic perspectives. Let's examine the key proofs that strengthen this controversial identification. First, statistical analysis has provided compelling mathematical support. When researchers compiled a comprehensive database of Greek literature from the period, they found that the probability of another text matching the exact letter patterns found in 7Q5 was less than 1 in 30 million. The specific sequence of letters visible on the fragment aligns perfectly with Mark 6:52-53, while proposed alternative readings require multiple unlikely assumptions. The physical evidence from scientific testing has been equally convincing. Carbon dating of the papyrus places it firmly within the 1st century. Microscopic analysis of the ink composition reveals formulae consistent with those used in professional scribal workshops of the period. The papyrus fiber patterns match manufacturing techniques documented in other manuscripts from before 70 AD. Alternative interpretations have been systematically examined and found wanting. The suggestion that the fragment might be from a Greek translation of 1st Enoch, proposed by some scholars, fails to match the visible letter patterns. The proposed identifications require even more speculative reconstructions of the text. Archaeological context provides another layer of validation. The discovery of the copper scroll in Cave 3, dated to around 100 AD, proves that manuscripts continued to be deposited in the Qumran caves after the commonly accepted date of 68 AD. This eliminates one of the major objections to the identification, the supposedly impossible chronology. Expert analysis of the handwriting style has confirmed its consistency with 1st century literary Greek. The letter forms show characteristics of a transitional period in Greek paleography, exactly what we would expect from a manuscript produced around 50 AD. The professional quality of the writing indicates production by a trained scribe working within established conventions. The historical evidence for rapid manuscript transmission has been thoroughly documented. Records from the period show that texts regularly traveled from Rome to Jerusalem in as little as 2 months. professional scribal networks maintained efficient systems for copying and distributing manuscripts throughout the Mediterranean world. Cross-referencing with other manuscripts from the period has validated both the dating and the production methods. The line spacing, margin measurements, and column width in 7q5 match patterns documented in other professional Greek manuscripts from the same period. Even the way the papyrus was cut follows known first-century conventions. Modern imaging technology has provided additional confirmation. Multispectral analysis has revealed previously invisible details of the text. Three-dimensional mapping of the papyrus surface has exposed impressions left by lost letters. Each new technological advance has added weight to the identification. With Mark's Gospel, the cultural context has been thoroughly validated through archaeological discoveries at other sites. Evidence from port cities, synagogue archives, and trading posts confirms regular interaction between Jewish and Greek-speaking communities. The presence of Greek texts at Qumran fits perfectly within this broader cultural pattern. Independent verification has come from scholars working in different fields. Papyrologists have confirmed the physical characteristics of the manuscript. Paleographers have validated the writing style. Statisticians have verified the probability calculations. Historians have authenticated the transmission patterns. This comprehensive validation from multiple disciplines removes the identification of 7q5 from the realm of mere speculation. While absolute certainty may be impossible when dealing with ancient manuscripts, the cumulative weight of evidence strongly supports the identification with Mark's Gospel. The implications of the 7q5 discovery extend far beyond the identification of a single manuscript fragment. This tiny piece of papyrus has revolutionized our understanding of early Christian texts, manuscript transmission, and the relationship between Jewish and Christian communities in the first century. First, we must reconsider the timeline of gospel composition and circulation. If 7q5 is indeed from Mark's Gospel and dates to around 50 AD, this provides physical evidence supporting early Christian traditions about the Gospel's composition during Peter's lifetime. It suggests that the development and spread of Christian texts happened much earlier and more rapidly than previously thought. The discovery has transformed our understanding of ancient manuscript transmission. We now know that sophisticated networks existed for copying and distributing texts throughout the Mediterranean world. Professional scribes maintained efficient systems that could move documents from Rome to Palestine within weeks. The old picture of isolated communities slowly developing their texts has given way to a more dynamic model of textual transmission. Our view of first-century Jewish communities has also evolved. The presence of Greek texts at Qumran reveals a community more engaged with the wider Hellenistic world than previously recognized. The rigid boundaries scholars once drew between Jewish and Christian communities have become more permeable, suggesting a complex pattern of interaction and exchange. The impact on manuscript studies has been equally profound. New technologies developed for studying 7q5 have revolutionized how we examine ancient texts. Multispectral imaging, 3D surface mapping, and advanced statistical analysis have become standard tools in manuscript research. These methods are now being applied to other ancient texts, yielding new insights across the field. Perhaps most significantly, the 7q5 controversy has demonstrated the importance of interdisciplinary research. The collaboration between paleographers, historians, archaeologists, and scientists has created new models for studying ancient manuscripts. The combination of traditional scholarship with modern technology has opened new possibilities for understanding our oldest biblical texts. However, the most profound lesson from the 7q5 investigation may be about the nature of historical evidence itself. Despite decades of research, advanced technology, and brilliant scholarly work, we cannot definitively prove whether this fragment is part of Mark's Gospel. What we can say with certainty is that its discovery and investigation have revolutionized our understanding of early manuscript transmission. This uncertainty isn't a failure. It's a reminder of the complexity of ancient history. The evidence supports both the possibility that 7Q5 is from Mark's Gospel and the possibility that it isn't. The statistical analysis showing high probability of matching Mark 6:52-53, the physical dating consistent with first-century composition, and the plausible transmission routes all make the identification possible. Yet the fragment's small size, alternative interpretations, and questions about Christian texts at Qumran create reasonable doubt. What we've uncovered today isn't just about identifying a single manuscript fragment. It's about transforming our understanding of how ancient texts were transmitted and preserved. The investigation of 7Q5, whether it's ultimately proven to be from Mark's Gospel or not, has opened new windows into the sophisticated world of first-century manuscript production and distribution. Let's review what we know with certainty. And Daisy, advanced imaging technology has revealed unprecedented details about ancient manuscript production. Professional scribal networks could transmit texts across the Mediterranean with remarkable speed. The boundaries between early Jewish and Christian communities were more fluid than previously thought. New methods of manuscript analysis are revolutionizing biblical scholarship. While the debate about 7Q5's identification continues, its impact on biblical scholarship is undeniable. Every year, new technologies and methods developed through this investigation reveal more secrets from ancient manuscripts. Each discovery adds another piece to the puzzle of how the Bible was transmitted through history. If you're fascinated by these discoveries at the intersection of ancient history and modern science, here's what you can do. Subscribe to our channel now to stay updated on the latest developments in biblical archaeology. Hit that notification bell to ensure you don't miss our upcoming episodes, where we'll explore more amazing discoveries that are transforming our understanding of biblical history. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What's your take on the 7Q5 controversy? What aspects of early manuscript transmission surprise you most? Remember, every time you open your Bible, you're connecting with a text that has survived through an incredible journey of preservation, scholarship, and discovery. The story of 7Q5, whether it's from Mark's Gospel or not, remains a fascinating chapter in this ongoing journey of discovery.